So I've already said that we're starting Advent today. Hope, peace, joy and love. Those they might get changed up over the week. We're starting with hope, this one for sure. I'm not sure if we'll go with the others in that particular order, but there you go. But like I hinted at a little earlier before we had that time to chat together, in 2020 across the world, in our schools, our workplaces, our neighbourhoods and our own homes, some people have lost their joy. Some of us have actually lost our joy. You saw that in that first video as well. Maybe some of us have lost our joy because we've lost jobs or perhaps taken big pay cuts. Maybe because things that we planned, like once-in-a-lifetime trips. I know one couple who had planned after they'd gotten married, they were going to travel, take 12 months and travel around the world for a working holiday. Families arranged to come over, weddings, those sorts of once-in-a-lifetime celebrations and things that just haven't been able to happen, or they've happened in such a small way that you feel like really robbed. And of course, directly because of the pandemic, some have experienced ill health and death. So there's a whole lot of joy robbers to do with the pandemic. But of course, we've also experienced some of the things. I promise it'll get more hopeful, okay? We're going low to start with. It'll get more hopeful. We've also experienced some of the regular robbers of joy that we have in any year. Pandemic or not, relationships break down, we get sick, people die, we have mental health issues, we fail our studies or we lose our jobs, we struggle with a new baby and lack of sleep or a bully at our workplace. So all those normal things have happened as well, but don't you think somehow all those regular things that might happen regardless of a pandemic, somehow it just seems worse because of this overhanging global fear and anxiety that we are dealing with? There's a Christian guy, actually, McCrindle, who's a really well-known Australian social researcher, and he's done a survey just recently in Australia, and it said in the survey that he did, it came out that 56% of Australians say they are struggling to find any joy or anything good in 2020. Okay, 56%. So joy has taken a hit. Whether you want to argue stats or whatever, I think you'd agree joy has taken a hit. So what about peace? Well, again, I want to say in 2020 across the world, in our country, in our workplaces, our schools, our neighbourhoods, our homes, people have lost their peace. Professional agencies and just the stories that we know and can tell each other show that there's been a massive spike in anxiety and worry. And in that same survey, 40% of Australians said they have suffered mental health issues this year that they believe will have a negative impact on them in the years to come. So peace has taken a hit. And for some, hope has gone as well. Okay, so industries and small businesses have closed, jobs have been lost, health has failed, and the sorts of everyday things that we used to think of as just ordinary everyday things, it's kind of crumbled in front of us, We didn't think twice about the freedom of being able to go to the sickbed of a relative, did we, prior to this year? Even if they were in another country, for that matter. Going to your grandchild's Christmas concert is way more complicated this year than it's ever been, certainly in my lifetime. Just going to a funeral or to work or school or TAFE. So much of the ordinary, stable, settled things of life have crumbled in front of us. And according to that same survey, 67% of Australians are coming to Christmas time actively worried about the future. Saying they're actually worried about tomorrow. And that's true even here in WA, where we have weathered COVID-19 extremely well. We've been very fortunate, haven't we? And even as we start, I was just chatting about that briefly with someone back there, even as we start to dream about the day when our whole country can be open to the world again, don't you think there's still that sort of sense of collectively holding our breath a little bit? I wonder, in fact, when it's all going to outbreak again and go back into chaos and disaster. So for many people, and I think most here, certainly those of us born since the mid-1940s, I know there's a few older here or listening online, but for those of us born since the end of the Second World War, the present is robbed of joy and peace, and the future is uncertain in a way that is not been experienced by us in our lifetime. Maybe individually, but I'm talking about globally, corporately. We haven't had an experience like this in our lifetime, at least in that sense. So, on the first Sunday of Advent, some of us are afraid to hope. We've lost confidence in tomorrow. But I want to say it is the first Sunday of Advent. You've probably heard that enough times now to have that in your head. And pandemic or not, heartache or not, we are going to do what people have done for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We're going to take this opportunity to deliberately take time to consider how we might find hope that will see us through to the end of 2020 and into 2021 and beyond. And that hope has to do with a baby. Which really, really surprises lots of people. A baby? I mean, they're lovely, but a baby? In fact, some people in our families and communities will say, well, that's sweet and sentimental and okay on a Christmas card, but it's not actually smart or rational to truly believe that there can be hope in a baby. Okay, so the story. We're going to read, each week we'll read some of the story along the way. But, Jesus, you probably noticed, was born in less than ideal circumstances. When you stop and think about it, the mystery of his conception must have been trauma enough for Mary and Joseph. But then they had to take a major journey along with a massive crowd of people. So don't just think of them tonking off on their donkey. There's hundreds of thousands of people that are moving. They had to take a major journey with a massive crowd of people just as Mary's due date was getting close. Can you imagine that? Back in May, setting out on a major journey before your little boy was born. And of course, wouldn't you know it, Murphy's Law there, she goes into labour just as they had arrived, and they can't find a guest room anywhere. So Mary gives birth to her baby in a shed, and she makes a makeshift bed for him out of the trough that the animals were given their feed in. That's where she puts her precious new boy. I would love to have been able to get Mary to do a survey. If Mark McCrindle was around back then and he said to her, so how are you scoring, Mary, on your sense of peace, joy, love and hope as this first Christmas unfolded with the birth of her son? She must have been feeling some fear, don't you think? And anxiety and concern. And she and Joseph must have felt unsettled. They must have actually been wondering, what is happening here? What does the future hold for me, for us, and for our baby? You see, they'd been told that this child was God himself. They had those amazing stories from the angels. They'd been told this precious baby is God himself come to be with humankind and going to grow to act for humankind. And they'd been told that this baby was a king who was going to have a kingdom that would never end. Okay, you read that in Luke chapter 1. But all of that was before. So before all the explaining they had to do to family and friends about why they were pregnant and they weren't married, or before they had to go on that long journey because of the unexpected announcement of a census, before the long trip, before not being able to find a place to stay, before. And I wonder, by the time it came for that baby to be born, I wonder how confident they were actually feeling about their future and about the future of their baby when God's own son was born in the middle of a busy, overcrowded town with people, tents and chaos because people couldn't find places to sleep and they didn't know if they were going to find places to get any food. And people were scared. They were saying to each other, what's going on? Why has the emperor ordered this census? Why does he want to do that? Life is already violent and unsettled enough under this guy, and now he wants to gather us in places and count us. What's happening here? A supposed king, born out the back in an animal shed with a makeshift bed. That's just not how I would have organised that scene. I don't think it's how Mary and Joseph would have organised it had they had a choice. I don't think it's how any of us would write that story. It's surprising. It's unexpected. Although, to be fair, a Messiah, a king, was expected and had been for generations. There's that beautiful prophecy in Isaiah that says, the young woman will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. But not like this. Not in the middle of a chaotic, frightening, unsettling time when the future looks so uncertain. No, God's son, not like this. No fanfare, no fireworks, no parade, just a sleeping baby in a manger, an animal feed trough in a stable out the back. That is not how people expected hope to show itself. Not how people expected God to show himself. Waited and waited for generations they had, but not like this. Not like this. But I was thinking about it in the week. And I want to ask, is it actually all that surprising when you stop to think about it? Is it all that surprising that God should turn up as a baby? Is it all that surprising that hope should come in the form of a newborn child? You know, 2020 has seen for many people loss and pain and fear and unprecedented changes, and babies have still been born. In our community alone, we have welcomed into the world this year Dawn and Zara and Annalise and Theodore, Matthew, Michael, Lewis, Hazel, Fred, Annabelle, Kate, Ilya, Archer and Connor, and I know that there are others as well. I'm sure they haven't got a comprehensive list. That's just in the community associated with LBC. All those babies. Babies are born into a global pandemic, into drought and bushfires, social upheaval, economic stress, and so much uncertainty. And yet we experience the gift of these babies as gifts of joy that bring us great hope for a better day. Because you see, that's what we feel and see when we hold a newborn in our arms. We look down at them, we look into their eyes or their sleeping faces, and we see hope, don't we? We see hope for a life that is good and meaningful and happy and worthwhile and satisfying. Hope for a life that is rewarding and peaceful. Hope for a life that is shaped by love. That's what we see when we look into a baby's face. So in that case, is it really surprising that God turned up as a baby 2,000 years ago? Less so when you put it in that context, don't you think? When I stop to think about it, it seems very much like something the God I know would actually do. The birth of the baby boy called Jesus is the hope of all the world. Because his birth was God coming to be with us in that most intimate and personal way, and that had been prophesied and expected and hoped for hundreds of years, for many, many generations. Emmanuel, God with us. As close as that baby you've held in your arms. And the birth of the baby boy called Jesus is the hope of all the world, because his birth was not just God coming to be with us, but it was God coming to act for us. Now, that baby grew to be a young man of influence, a leader. That man grew to do something through his own death and resurrection that has given us hope that evil and death will not always win. The birth of the baby boy called Jesus is the hope of all the world. I really believe that. Many of you do, I know. This baby is our hope, because the baby is those two things, if we can just remember that: God with us and God for us. God with us like the little baby, God for us. It is death and resurrection, doing something to defeat evil and death so that it will not always win. And you know, even when the things we used to think were orderly and predictable are not anymore, even when we hurt and struggle and ache, even when we long for a time when people won't do terrible things to each other and abuse and deceive and let each other down, even in those spaces, Jesus is hope for the world. He's hope for a better tomorrow, I believe that for sure. But I think too that he is hope for a better today, because today he offers chaos. He doesn't offer chaos. He offers peace in the chaos today. We hope for that better day in the future where we will experience that perfectly, but he offers peace in the chaos today, joy in sorrow, and confidence and hope in uncertainty. Today he loves us. Today he is with us. Today he is for us, and that's the hope of Christmas time. I just want to finish by telling you a story. It's Shelley's story. She's given me permission to share this with you. A couple of weeks ago, I had opportunity to sit with Shelley. We were talking about something, and I asked her, so how did you come to know Jesus, Shelley? And she told me that she first knew Jesus with her, when she was in primary school. She was at home listening to her mum and dad fighting, and she was feeling sad and anxious, as children do when their parents are unhappy with each other. And Shelley told me, I heard a quiet voice say, go outside. So Shelley went into the yard and sat under a tree. She remembers it was a lovely day, and she sat there for a long time. And Shelley said to me, it was beautiful, calm and peaceful. I felt happy. Later on, her mum came outside and rather crossly wanted to know, Shelley, what are you doing? And Shelley said, I told my mum I'm talking to God. And mum just went quietly back inside. Not long after this experience of God with her, Shelley wandered into the local primary school on a Sunday and found there was a church meeting there. And someone there said, how did you know there was a church here? And Shelley said, I didn't. I just felt compelled to walk down the road into the primary school today. And so she joined that local church and grew in her understanding and experience of God for her. She'd known God with her under that tree, and she grew in her understanding of God for her. Shelley's not in primary school anymore, not being rude. But since that time of knowing God with her and learning that he is for her, Shelley has known peace and joy and great hope like she felt that day under the tree. And I know that she's known that in some of life's very, very tough circumstances. And I don't think it's any coincidence that occurred to me after I'd spoken with Shelley, that when you spend time sitting with Shelley, you experience her peace and hopefulness. Sitting with Shelley is a little like sitting under a tree in the garden with Jesus. There's a reason for that. I don't know what Christmas is going to bring for you or for me in the current difficult circumstances, in the good things, in the unknown things. I don't know. We can't tell. And we don't know if things globally, are going to get better. Is it going to get better for WA, Australia, the world? We don't know what's going to happen in that space. But what I really want to say is that I hope this Christmas you know Jesus standing in your corner. That you know God with you. And more than that, you know God with you, but more than that, will you know the God who acted for you? So that in this gap that you might be living in between how you would like life to be and how it actually is, you will know peace and joy, and you will know you are loved. So then I thought, well, okay, that's lovely, nice words for a preacher to say. May you know God is with you and for you. May you feel loved. What are we going to do? What's one practical thing we can do to open ourselves up to that experience? Well, I think there's a clue in Shelley's story, actually. I want to suggest that we each resolve before we leave this place today to make a place and time, perhaps every day, maybe once a week. Don't do it less than once a week, I wouldn't say. Make a time and a place to sit with Jesus. Maybe it will be outside for you. Maybe it'll be in the bush or at the beach, maybe in the garden, maybe in a comfy chair, a favourite part of your home. But will you do that? Will you deliberately resolve to make a time to sit with Jesus? And if you already know Jesus, then what I want to suggest you do in that space when you go sit with him is invite his Holy Spirit to fill you with peace and joy and hope. Actually, deliberately, intentionally invite the Holy Spirit to minister to you in that space. Have your head and heart open to it. And if you don't yet follow Jesus, well, I want to invite you to sit with him anyway. And you can ask him to show himself to you this Christmas season. That's on him. All it takes for you is to turn up, sit, and ask. So I hope that brings what could be an airy-fairy message in one sense to something tangible. Will you find a place to sit? If you follow Jesus, ask the Spirit to show you peace, hope, joy, fill your heart with love. If you don't yet follow him, sit with him anyway and say, come on, Jesus, will you show yourself to me?